started CS Davidson in Hanover, and since then we now have offices in Lancaster, York, and Gettysburg.
Our next speaker, his name is Jim Ritzman, who is also a professional engineer, and his title is Deputy Secretary for Planning for PennDOT. Jim is in charge of PennDOT's Office of Planning, which oversees the TIP. It also oversees almost all aspects of statewide transportation planning, which includes the management of the federal highway and bridge funds, which total $1.25 billion. I'm happy to have him here today, and hopefully he can shed some light on some of the legislation we've already talked about and the governor's plan to move some of these issues you just heard about in a positive manner. So, thank you, Jim.
Good afternoon. Okay. We'll get the easy parts out of the way. The good news is you can't see the view that I can. So that'll be a good start. First of all, I want to thank CS Davidson for pulling this together. So thank you very much. I think it's so important for us to be sharing the facts that we see. I think there's a great opportunity to see it from a number of perspectives. I know everybody sees things a little bit differently, and hopefully there'll be some things you hear that I share this morning or this afternoon that are really going to catch and help you see things, again, from a perspective from PennDOT. Just a little bit of overview of what you'll hear today, this afternoon. I want to share a little bit what's going on at the state level, a little bit what's going on at the national level and how that impacts things. Paint a little picture of history, highlight some of Governor Corbett's transportation plan issues, and then ultimately drive it to say, what's it mean to you and me? I think there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to share with regards to what PennDOT's doing from a modernization perspective, a PennDOT next generation perspective looking to the future, that again, hopefully will trigger some real thoughts on how you can do your job a little bit differently. First of all, from an overview of Governor Corbett's plan to secure transportation funding. Safety and commerce are critical to everything that we do, where we work, where we live, how we enjoy life, and that's the main focus of the transportation goals in Pennsylvania. A number of things that, again, are highlighted, but I'll just want to put a little emphasis point on is if there is not a significant transportation funding increase in Pennsylvania, you will see a change in things. You will see a degradation in conditions. I'll show a little bit more specifics to that. When you post and close a bridge, vehicles are on detours. Those detours are typically less safe than the road that was originally open. There is also an added cost for goods and commerce making longer trips, taking longer time, using more fuel. Those are the kinds of things that are in costs that you're going to pay for it either one way or another way. And I think, again, as we talk through this discussion, there's a choice that has to be made with regards to what we want Pennsylvania to be like. And we'll live with either one, but there are some definite pros and cons to each. And again, one of the key points with the transportation goals in Pennsylvania is that it's for a system. Had a little advocacy for transit, so that's good that I won't have to do that part because I'm a bridge and highways kind of guy most of the time. But it's integral. It's what Pennsylvania is. Pennsylvania needs to be focused on our railroads, focused on our aviation, focused on pedestrian movements and bike movements, but we really need to be focused on transit and highways and bridges. One of the things that I think is most encouraging from being a career PennDOT employee, I've been with PennDOT just about 28 years, is that transportation is not Republican or Democrat. You don't have roads and bridges that are only used by one party or another. Again, the Transportation Funding Advisory Commission report didn't even talk about the need. They said, hey, the previous administration, a Democratic administration, already studied this. We may go back and look at it and come up with another dollar amount, but the point is there's a tremendous transportation need. The Democratic administration recognized it, the Republican administration recognized it. There is a significant transportation funding need. That report from Governor Corbett, from Governor Rendell showed a need for $3.5 billion of additional funding each and every year for 2010. If you look at that report, there was a number of about $7 billion for 2020. So we're somewhere in that range in between. So it's a tremendous need that was recognized again by everyone in Pennsylvania. One of the things that I'd want to point out, there was a bit of a lag between the Transportation Funding Commission report and Governor Corbett coming out with a transportation plan, and there was good reason for that. One of the reasons was modernization. If you heard or hear Barry Shoak talk, most of what he talks about is what's changing in PennDOT, the modernization initiatives, PennDOT Next Generation, continuing to focus on what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and figure out a better way, because we want to continue to become more efficient and more effective. And again, I think that's a message for all of us that we can take home. One of the things that was in that transportation funding report were 39 specific modernization initiatives that did not require additional money to start, did not require legislation for us to get started. We jumped on those and were prodded from Barry to continue focusing on modernization. A couple examples of those that you may or may not have heard about are the electronic highway occupancy permitting system. The time it takes for us to turn around highway occupancy permits has changed dramatically in Pennsylvania. Just an utter success. One of the things that you probably didn't hear of, and I'm going to use this as an example, a very simple example that just continues to challenge us to say, why do you do that? And it has to do with outdoor advertising compliance. We're required by federal highways to look at billboards, the highway outdoor advertising billboards that are around, and we're required to make sure that they comply with federal guidelines. We do that every year. We did that every year until somebody says, why do we do that every year? Well, Federal Highways makes us. No, Federal Highways makes us review them. They don't tell us how often we have to review them. Let's check around. So we check around with the other states. Some states were doing it every 3 years. Some states, most states, were doing them every 2 years. We sat down with Federal Highways and said, can we put together a plan that says we're going to do the same thing in 2 years rather than 1 year? Sure. Guess what? We just freed up a lot of people's time doing the exact same thing. So is that a big dollar savings? No. But guess what? It sends a message. It sends a message that says, if you're asked to do something, find out why you do it, make sure you understand how you do it. Oh, by the way, do you think technology changed since we implemented outdoor advertising? You bet. There are continuous ways to make things go a whole lot smoother, a lot quicker, a lot faster, a lot more efficient. Redirect, we're not going to run out of work to do. Redirect those efforts to other things that we need to do, that we're behind the eight ball in doing. So again, that's just a sense of modernization. I'll touch on IdeaLink as well. IdeaLink is, again, one of those simple things that if you're not getting ideas from your employees on how to do things better, you're not doing your job. And I think that's one of the things that, again, Secretary Shoak came in and said, hey, where's our ideas system? Well, we had one years ago. Didn't get a whole lot, so we stopped doing it. Well, guess what? Since Barry came in, we've had almost 1,000 submissions. 176 of them were implemented at the point. Barry reviews every response to every idea that comes in. Oh, by the way, he didn't quite understand one submission or response, so he picks up the phone and calls the guy and says, hey, this is Barry Shoak. I'm reading this. Who is this? So it's, in an organization that's not used to the the CEO picking up the phone and calling everybody who has an idea. He's going to do that. If there's a question about an idea that's suggested, he's going to call and get that clarification. That's his commitment to making sure that when you have an idea, we're seriously considering it. I want to tell a little story. My wife's a nurse and my daughter's a sophomore in nursing school, so this particularly struck home to me. Hospital regulations require a wheelchair for patients being discharged. However, when working as a student nurse, this is a joke, so be prepared, be prompted, that I found one elderly gentleman already dressed and sitting on a bed with a suitcase at his feet who insisted he didn't need any help to leave the hospital. After a chat about rules being rules, he reluctantly let me wheel him to the elevator. On the way down, I asked him if his wife was meeting him. "I don't know," he said. "She's still upstairs in the bathroom changing out of her hospital gown." The point being, there are times, even though we know better, I'm sure you all think PennDOT always knows better, there are times when it makes sense to listen. A lot of times that it makes sense to listen. So again, I think that's an important note and an important emphasis point that we want to put whenever we talk about Idea Link. One of the other areas that really comes from ideas is some of the positive things that we hear from our federal government. And you won't hear me being too positive too many times, but I think everyday counts is one of those areas that we strongly support. And the reason we do is because we appreciate a federal organization who recognizes that every day does count. While 52 states and jurisdictions are different, and we appreciate the differences between them, there are an awful lot of good things that happen in other states that we haven't implemented yet. And that's pretty much what Everyday Counts is all about. It's making sure that when there's proven technology, proven advancements, proven innovation, proven changes in project delivery that take place in another state, that there's an opportunity for those to be strongly encouraged in each and every state. So that's one of the areas that we're also very focused on. And an additional area is one that's called the State Transportation Innovation Council. And this is sort of like the Idea Links on steroids. Essentially what we said is, yeah, we get good ideas from our people, but do you realize how many players there are in construction, in design, in materials, in the Commonwealth? Let's get a group of people together who are focused on innovation. So that's what this is. There are 10 technical advisory groups focusing on specific areas of expertise, and they meet about every other month to talk about implementing successes. So it's contractors from other parts of the state who work in other states telling us about what Maryland's doing. There are components of associations, Township Supervisors Association, academia. Where are the good technologies, where are the good innovations, where are the good materials being used, and how can we use this? Again, this is co-chaired by our secretary, Barry Shoke, as well as the Federal Highway Administrator, Renee Siegel. So again, very focused attention on making sure that when we get good ideas, not just from inside, but from consultants, designers, academia, wherever they come from, that we're seriously looking at them and seriously working on them. One of the things that we've done at the end of the calendar year was document some of those successes, put in paper and a publication that's on our website, on PennDOT's website, again, documenting between $50 and $70 million in annual savings that have come from our modernization efforts. Just give another couple examples. Again, hopefully these are not just things that you hear PennDOT's doing, but that you hear and say, wow, we can do things like that as well. One of them is called, I'll term as the Eagle. We have a driver's licensing center. We do 12 million transactions of driver's licenses, and I forget the number, 18 million vehicle registrations every year. We're good at it. We have a machine that's probably 3 barn panels, 3 barn columns long, and it's called the Eagle, and it takes the envelopes that people send in with those vehicle renewals, and we have somebody who puts those in the chute. It goes through, opens them up, reads the check, gets the money from the bank, starts the process for all these, and it just goes through like, you can't believe how quick this thing is. And it's an amazing piece of technology. The reason I say that is, guess what? DCNR has a paper process for ATV renewals. Guess what? If an agency thinks outside of what we're doing and says, hey, if we were one company and we had a subsidiary that's really good at something, wouldn't we be trying to put all the work there? So we talked with DCNR, and lo and behold, for about $25,000, we can adjust the software in our Eagle so that we can do their ATV renewals. They had 9 people doing this by hand. We're not putting them out of work. Do you think DCNR has more stuff that they could be doing? Absolutely. So guess what? For about $25,000 a year, they can redirect their employees to be doing other things. Again, it's just one way that states need to be working. A state needs to be working better within the agencies within the state to make sure we're efficient and effective. Same way townships with similar borders. I could go on, and since I had some extra time, I could go on and on. We have 67 counties, 11 district offices. Typically, those district offices have worked within their district. Those are other ways of saying, you know what, if you're out doing bridge inspections, why stop here when there's another bridge there? So it's just using some GIS technologies that we have and making sure that when we're out, we're making the best use of the workforce that we have to cover the most territory and with the limited time and resources that we do have. Another example back with DCNR, and I think there's huge opportunities here that are hard to squeeze out, but will really pay off. Anybody know what's a primary function of state DOTs? How about winter services? What do you think a primary function of DCNR is? Summer vacations. Guess what? They have a lot of equipment that isn't used when we want to use the most. We have a lot of equipment that isn't really used when they want to use it most. So not only is trying to figure out how we can best use each other's equipment cost effective, but we'll be able to reduce fleet sizes by just using other people's equipment. So there are, again, one of the areas that we're really focusing on right now is Presque Isle. Lake Erie is one of the pilot areas for really trying to use each other's equipment and figure out how best we can reduce what we need. I guess I'll leave that as enough said. Now this is a slide that I wish you could all read every little number, and here's an assignment for you to go home if you want to depress yourself this weekend. This is, go on Google or Yahoo and just type in debt clock time machine, and you'll see the numbers of national debt just flying by in numbers that I don't remember what comes after trillion. Now, I mean, U.S. total debt in the middle is $59.4 trillion, and that's probably 2 weeks old. But these things are live, they just keep changing, and I use this slide so you think I'm really smart. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's mainly a lead-in to just say, hey, when you look at transportation funding from the national level, things aren't getting any better. When you look at what that transforms into the state transportation improvement program, we put together a 12-year program or a 4-year transportation improvement program every 2 years. Guess what? Every 2 years it gets less and less. Doesn't mean we're going to be able to do more. If you look back 4 years, so 2 of those cycles were down 25% of state and federal investments in highways and bridges. That's reality. So if you think that the federal government's going to ride in on a white horse and save the day, it's not going to happen. You look at the trend lines from the previous slide, every one of those is going in the wrong direction. Something's not going to happen at the federal level. And here's one more little reality check from the federal level. And again, the one thing I'd want you to focus on, there's 3 fairly vertical lines. And basically what this is a picture of the Highway Trust Fund, the balance that's there of how the federal dollars come to PennDOT for investment in highways and bridges. Over those 6 years, there are 3 vertical lines, and essentially that's what happened whenever the Highway Trust Fund went just about bankrupt. There was an infusion of general fund money. Just like at the state level, the federal money going in from our gas taxes aren't even holding us even with the level of investment that we have. MAP 21 provided 2 years of funding this current federal fiscal year and 1 more. Guess what? They needed additional billions of dollars to be able to hold us flat. Between these 3 vertical lines is about $30 billion that had to come over to the Federal Highway Trust Fund to keep us almost even. The next 2 years, we're in that same range, about $18 billion of general fund money coming over. Again, the picture isn't bright, and I think we'll continue on with a little bit of doom and gloom till we have a little rosier picture. But I think the piece that I want to just talk now is shift gears a little bit and say, how does PennDOT invest? How do we make decisions about what we want to do? We'll start off with a little bit of structurally deficient bridge stories. We are the worst in the country. And we had a huge effort under Governor Rendell, and Al Beeler, the previous secretary, used to always talk about, he'd go in, talk to Governor Rendell, and just tell him how important it was for us to invest in bridges. So we made some changes in how we invest. Put a more focused investment in bridges, borrowed money to bond money to put to bridges, an accelerated bridge program, had record accomplishments of delivering bridges to construction. 3 years later, Al will tell the story of him walking into Governor Rendell and Governor Rendell saying, so how are we doing with this bridge problem? Oh, we got more structurally deficient bridges than we did when we made all these changes. Well, why is that? Because we have 25,000 of them. The average age is 52 years, and I always like to say, for every one that you see that's brand new, there's another one that's 100 years old. Or look at it this way, for every one that's brand new, there's 2 of them that are 75 years old. Either way, there is just a boatload of bridges that we have that are going to take us forever to get to fix, even at record levels. We've made incredible work success with regards to dealing with structurally deficient bridges. We're down from about 6,600 to 4,400. But guess what? It came at a price. It came at a price of not working somewhere else. It's the big bubble. You all know how it works. It's the same way in state government as it is in local government. If you want to solve one problem, you shift resources to that direction because you don't have enough resources to do it all. Again, just a little bit of fast forward on the button. With current funding, you're going to see a steady rise again of structurally deficient bridges. We need to replace about 300 a year to stay even. If we're not spending enough to replace 300 bridges every year, we're going to go into decline. You're going to see that happen without additional transportation funding. Oh, by the way, every time you close a bridge or post a bridge, it's causing the price of what you're paying every day to either to take the detour or for an oversized vehicle to take the detour or a milk truck to take the detour or whatever else is trying to get from point A to point B. I think that's an important piece, and I guess the one thing that I'd want to make sure is there are choices that we need to make as Pennsylvanians. We can either choose to pay more at a gas pump or put more money into transportation funding, or we can choose not to. Either way, there's a consequence and a benefit. And I think once you recognize that putting resources to help solve a problem is a better choice than trying to avoid a problem and spending more anyway and not really helping, that isn't a really good choice. We saw the rough roads, and I was one of those skeptics who says if we're getting a D in roads and a C in bridges, something's wrong with the scoring system because our roads aren't that bad yet. Brad Mallory is back at PennDOT. Brad used to be a Secretary of Transportation for PennDOT a number of years back in the day when we had the last transportation funding increase in '97. He's been describing this slide as we're going to become third world country-ish. You will see roads, and I'll back up a step. When I was talking about focusing on bridges, What we decided to do was say, we're not even going to try to make our roads smoother anymore. We're going to try to hold them about where they're at. Not focus on making them smoother. Let's try to keep them together as best we can. Redirect all that money over to bridges. Well, we almost did that. In these years of 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you start to see the roughness. So the chart's sort of opposite what you would think it to be. The roughness, the ride smoothness is getting worse over those years when we were heavily focused in bridges. And we're showing a straight line trajectory that gets us back into the day of 1997, back when roads were really in bad shape. Again, additional resources. We're like a factory. You hate to say it that way. The more resources that we have, the more resources that you have, the more job that gets done. We have about 76% of every dollar that comes in goes either to a contractor, a materials purchase, or a design firm. We're very heavily engaged in the private sector. One of the other things that you'll see, if you haven't already, is just the love of tar and chip and seal coats rather than resurfacing. That's a big change in how we try to hold roads together as best we can. Oh, by the way, there's another wave of really bad news. This is an ugly chart that I'll explain a little bit, and you'll get a sense, a little more sense of it. PennDOT has 40,000 miles of roadway that we're responsible for. We talked about asset management a couple times today. If you think about it from an asset management perspective and say that every road should be replaced every 40 years, and you could argue that, but that's just a baseline. If you say every road should be replaced every 40 years, we would need to reconstruct those roads, 500 miles of them every year. And that's what the vertical chart is, 500 miles. This chart shows for about the last 20 years or so, how many of those that we've actually reconstructed. Not doing too bad in the early 90s, maybe about half, almost half of what you think you should. If you look at what we've done the last couple of years, oh yeah, we're at about 5% of what we should. We're not reconstructing roads anymore. It's a hard cry to find where we're doing that. What we're doing is we're doing some milling and resurfacing, some thin overlays. We're trying to hold that ride quality together and ignoring where the problems really are. You can't just paint over bad wood for very long, because whenever you resurface again and again and again, and you're not dealing with the problem, the life of that resurface is shorter and shorter and shorter. Do you think we don't know that? No, we know that. Do you think we don't know where the structurally deficient bridges are? No, we know where they are too. We're just making the choices we have with the resources we have to try to figure out how you can get by. Same thing you do. I love speaking to audiences like this, because you see, oh yeah, that's what we do. We know what we need to be doing. We know what we need to be working on. You just can't. Probably the most telling slide of this painting the picture of what PennDOT's all about is this one. And this one is, again, when you look at the ASCE perspective of what resonates with people, safety, congestion. I don't even want to talk about congestion. Do you know why? Because we're not doing anything about it. And again, another conscious choice. What this is showing is each one of these columns represents every 2 years where we update a 4-year plan, our transportation investment program. Far left is 2001 to 2004. At that point, we spent about 25% of the resources we had in new capacity, either widening an existing road, building a new road. Since 2009, we've been at less than 5% of our investment. You got 202 around Philadelphia, you got Route 28 outside of Pittsburgh. Anybody else to think of something where we widened lately? We're just redirecting the resources we have and saying, I'm going to stick my head in the sand and not deal with capacity expansion because we can't afford it. It's how things are. Oh yeah, by the way, remember when I told you about that pie getting smaller, 25%? You know, that's not reflected in a percent. So the smaller percent is even in a smaller pie. So it's just piddly investment in transportation expansion. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. That was the doom and gloom. To Governor Corbett's transportation plan. He has a plan that in 5 years would generate $1.8 billion. And what that plan does, it gradually deregulates an oil company franchise tax in 3 installments in year 1, year 3, and year 5. Right now, wholesale gas is taxed. It was capped at $1.25, so that probably equates to about $2.25 a gallon. So anytime that there's anybody ever pay more than $2.25 a gallon? Yeah. There is no more money that comes to PennDOT if it's $2.50, $3, $4, $5 a gallon. We get the same amount of money. So when you get more fuel-efficient vehicles, guess what? Less resources come to PennDOT, resources get distributed by PennDOT and are used for highways and bridges. So this would uncap that tax as well as decrease the flat tax. Every gallon of gas has a 12-cent tax on it. So in year 1, it would drop a penny from 12 cents to 11 cents. In year 2, it would go from 11 cents to 10 cents. So there would be a little bit of a decrease in a flat tax and an increase on a oil company franchise tax. What does that really mean? It's hard to tell. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting questions to see people answer, as to say, okay, well, how much would get passed through? How much does this mean I'm going to be paying more for? I don't know. That's the truth. There is so much involved in what goes into a gas price. Part of it is, what are they paying by the barrel? Part of it is, how is the incentive for a convenience store to get you to stop at their spot so you can go in and pay $2 for a bottle of water or for a cup of coffee. There is a whole lot of pricing that's well beyond what the tax structure is. And all it takes is you to drive 10 minutes from one spot to another spot and see the variation in gas prices across whoever's from the York County area. I think that's probably one of the best places to buy gas. Find a Rutter's along I-83, and that's probably one of the cheapest spots. It's the same tax structure. Why is there so much variation? I don't know. If you assume that the entire price of an oil company franchise tax would be passed on to the consumer, it would be about 25 cents. 25 cents a gallon. If you look at that over 5 years, and you take what the average consumer, average miles, 12,000 miles a year, it's about $2 a week in 5 years is what that cost would be. So that's another way of answering the same question. One of the things that we talked about a little bit is, okay, well, what does that mean to me? Talked about that one. What does that mean to me with regards to local roads and bridges? We'll talk about that one first. In year 1, there would be about a $70 million increase for liquid fuels funds. In year 5, it would be about a $200 million increase. So by year 5, if you're a municipality that's getting $200,000 a year, you'd be getting about $310,000 a year. So it's a little bit more of a 50% increase directly. One of the things that I'll say is, if you have bridges, us having more resources allows us to be able to be a partner in more resources, and I'll talk about that a lot more in a bit. On the state side, it would be an increase of about $1.2 billion a year. A multimodal fund, which I could talk about forever as well. Turnpike gets a little bit more, as well as public transit would get $250 million more. I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of these components a little bit later. Other pieces of the transportation plan, a huge modernization component. Right now you do a vehicle registration every year. One of these changes would make that to be every other year, same price. You'd pay for 2 years at a time instead. so you avoid the hassle. One of the things it also does is allows us not to put that little sticker on the back of your license plate. Because of that little sticker, we need to mail things. There's huge savings in not mailing, especially when you got, how many did I say? 12 million a year? Oh, yeah, stamps. So it allows us to use technology, print off the stuff at your home computer. You don't have to come in. We don't have to mail a little sticker back to you. Same thing with the driver's license. There was talk originally in the TFAC report to go to 8 years. Changing that with the state police, they thought, oh, because of the facial recognition software, they agreed to 6 years. That 6 years, again, provides for savings in the hassle factor. It also provides a benefit by cutting down on mail, things like that. I'm going to jump through to this slide. One of the things, what does it mean for people working, contractors? Again, you'll see under a current funding, us going from about a $2 billion a year construction letting program to about $1.4 billion in that 5-year time frame, in contrast to just about a $2.6 billion annual program. What that means for workers, construction workers, a loss of about 12,500 workers to a gain of 50,000. So a net change of about 62,000 jobs each and every year. One of the things, again, I talked about that choice between two visions for Pennsylvania. One of the things that we're working on that you'll see very, very soon is a website. We've been meeting with the legislature, showing them the difference between what do you get today. Here's a website that shows all the projects that you'll see over the next decade. That's why we're calling it a decade of investment. A Google Earth type, click on a county, pop up the projects. Here's where from here to here, what's the description, how much does it cost? These are the projects you get that Pennsylvania would see over the next 10 years under current funding. Then another tier of projects that says, here's the projects that you would see under the governor's funding plan. And since Senate Bill 1 was introduced and passed the Senate Transportation Committee overwhelmingly, we added a third color that says, here's the projects, additional projects that you would be able to see with an additional higher funding level. So those are some key pieces of understanding. We want to make sure that people who are asked to pay more for something recognize what they get for that added payment. In the just so you know factor, anything that you want to see with regards to modern PennDOT, our performance report that we recently put out there, a lot of the information from slides that I've used or from Barry Shope's original presentation are all on our website. I encourage you to take a look at that. I do want to spend a little bit more time on Senator Rafferty's bill because it did come out. And it has a higher funding level. Instead of hitting that $1.8 billion in 5 years, it would be $2.5 billion in 5 years. It does include additional increases in licensing, registration fees, permitting fees. Are pretty much your existing fees are inflation from the last time they were increased is added and then has a cost of inflation moving forward, and then there's a $100 surcharge on every traffic law violation. So that's how you get to build up between the 1.8 and the 2.5 billion. It's pretty much, the balance of it is pretty similar to what Governor Corbett's plan is. If you look specifically in those same components of what do certain segments of the market get, for instance, local roads and bridges, the difference would be from about $200 million a year to $240 million a year. So depending on how you want to calculate that, it could be another 20% increase. Essentially what happens is the differences are where Governor Corbett's plan had the 12-cent flat tax reduced to 10 cents. It is temporarily reduced to 10 cents and then gets increased again. So those townships who know you get how much from your penny of gas tax, that part comes back. So that's pretty much the difference. You'll see a considerable more amount for public transportation as well as for PennDOT. I like this slide. Every year, every other year, each of us at PennDOT get to make a strategic business plan to talk about how we're moving forward. This is Better Never Stops was the theme or the motto for the London Olympics, for the England's team, so the home team. And I just think that really portrays a lot of the things that we're trying to do at PennDOT to make sure that we continue to push ourselves to become efficient and effective in everything we do. You can't rest on your laurels and say, oh, wasn't that a good idea? Yeah, but what's that make you think of? What's that next thing make you think of? What's that next thing make you think of? And just because you got a little bit better doesn't mean the best is done. So this next little segment, again, is just going to talk about some of the things that we're doing. Some of them are very apropos to what you guys do as well. And again, hopefully this gets you to think of some other things that can really be done to make us a better system of roads and bridges that really fit well together, regardless of ownership. First thing, I was happy to see our little LTAP booth in the back, so thank you, Kenita. One of the things that we said, most of the people who work for me work in an office setting. And you say, safety, LTAP, you got the chainsaw training, you got the, traffic control training, but, what about office people? Well, when I became a state employee, before I was allowed to drive a state vehicle, I had to take a defensive driving class. 1985 was the last time I took a defensive driving class. So guess what? I said, you know what? If I really care about the safety of my workforce, wouldn't I want them reminded of what they should be doing? Guess what? There is a free course provided through LTAP for defensive driving, for safe drivers. Some insurance companies give you deducts, so there's an incentive for people to go to it, but also it helps us focus on what's really important, making sure that at the end of the day, everybody you have working for you comes home safe. And I think that's a really good reminder. If you think having a defensive driving course is a waste of time, it doesn't have to have too many payoffs to really, really pay off. So one of the other things that we instituted on our metrics is saying, you know what, I want to know how many days that we've gone without an injury. Again, in an office environment, doesn't happen too often, but I want the reminder that says everybody knows that this is one of the most important things that people can be telling me, is that yes, another day, another week, another month, another year, we've gone without an injury. That's a good thing. I don't want that to fall off the table and say, doesn't happen that often. Switching gears, we are doing some amazing things with GIS and modernization, and I couldn't be prouder of the work group that we have working on things, but we got a ways to go. We were national award winners last year for something that we do, probably a couple slides back, about linking planning and NEPA, which is about how our projects get developed, how they're initially scoped. We have 37 layers of data now that you can visually see that says, oh, cultural resource here. Guess what? When we're thinking about working on an intersection, let's shift it to the left a little. It's going to make the process a whole lot better. We need right-of-way. Well, maybe we shift it to the right 2 feet. We're going to avoid some things that are just going to slow down the process. There are some amazing tools. We talked about a little bit about bridge inspection. That's one of the areas too that we've used this. We're doing not just using GIS to color maps and help share information. We're using it to be helping make sure that when we have snow routes, that they're the most efficient and effective snow routes. GIS is an incredible tool that has just changed over the years and allowed us to use so much more for not just showing information, but making better decisions. And again, that's an area I could probably talk on for a whole lot longer. Again, one other example of how we're trying to work as a better state partner with other state agencies. With one of these tools, we're showing DCNR, for instance, DEP, DCED, where we're going to be doing work over the next 4 years, 10 years. And we got a little time bar at the bottom that says, guess what? Here's where we're working. These are our construction zones. What time do you want to see? And you'll just see them open up and close up. Oh, by the way, we want your projects on our map so that we're working collaboratively. Maybe DEP has a project that impacts our project. Maybe we ought to be moving ours up 6 months, a year, delaying ours 6 months, so we can match project schedules together, bid them together, get a better bid, but ultimately impact people, delay people less often. Similar thing, there are so many ways of working better together, and that's just one more aspect that we're really focusing on. I did talk a little bit about linking planning and NEPA already. Here's one, I just loved your asset management conversations. Well, time flies when you're having fun, so, we still got lots of time here. So I'd say about 4 years ago, we were talking about local data, and the little triangle on the left side is just one that we've said about, I have responsibility for our Bureau of Municipal Services. And what we do, probably the most important thing we do is get money out to townships, boroughs, whoever receives it. There's assortment. Liquid fuels are probably $320 million a year. So people are waiting for that check. But you know what? As we think about my responsibility of trying to make sure that every investment in Pennsylvania is more efficient and effective, I got to be encouraging other people that I hand money to be thinking the same way. So one of the things that we do, that we're required to do, is say, is this an eligible use of funds? Yes. Well, guess what? There's a lot of eligible uses of funds that can be a waste. What we want to do is make sure that you're getting great quality, appropriate use out of them. And one of the things that just sort of illustrates this was talking about asset management. What bridges do you have? Well, there's a federal requirement for every bridge that's over 20 feet to get inspected. What if you got one that's 19 feet 9 inches? Do you have to inspect it? Nope. Do you even know you have one? Nope. What we did, we started a pilot. First one was Lycoming County, and do you know where they started from? They started from their GIS system, got a GIS system. Let's show you where the water is, and show you where the roads are. Where the two intersect, hey, there might be a bridge there. Let's go look. And you think that's sort of comical? It's not. It's serious. So what we did was we're funding every MPO and RPO across the state to go and do a local inventory. They're going out with these little high-tech, it's happening, yeah. We're taking pictures, we're doing the GPS, we're giving the training to say, here's how you classify these bridges. If you see one that's really scary, here's a number to call. Guess what? Doing these things, we've shut down plenty of bridges because they can't believe what they look like when you crawl under them. We found bridges that when you measure them correctly, they're not 19 feet 9 inches. They're 22 feet 6 inches. You should have been inspecting them. There's an awful lot of people, awful lot of produce, an awful lot of school buses going over bridges that haven't been looked at seriously. We're doing that on the roadway system as well. So there will be an inventory that's passed out and highly encouraged to say, you know what, you gotta, before you can make sure you're using your resources the best way you can, baseline is you gotta know what you have. So that's one of the areas that we're really making great strides. Again, one of the things that I'd say is really exciting to be involved in is how we use GIS to make better decisions. Two things I want to talk about here. This is a map. We do know where structurally deficient bridges are in Lancaster County. You got a lot of them. You got a case of chickenpox. So if you think being last isn't so bad, just wait till you see about a quarter of these posted. If you've heard Barry Shoke talk lately, what he's talking about is saying, we are the most liberal state in the country in making a determination of structurally deficient. What that means is, if we were At the other end of the spectrum, there'd be 14,000 more bridges that would be structurally deficient. Probably about 30% of those could be posted or closed. So we have, just by a characterization of how we inspect and classify, we could have another 3,000 bridges in Pennsylvania that are posted and closed. And Barry's saying, you know what? If I know this is all the money I get, and I'm not going to be able to fix these in the next 10 years, I got to do everything that I can to preserve every day that somebody can drive on that. So I'm getting the heavy vehicles off of them. I'm going to post them. What do you think that does to commerce, to the cost of products, to moving the school bus, having some more stories about school buses where the kids get off and walk across? I mean, there are serious repercussions of the lack of investment that we have. Again, negative side, we'll flip this over to the positive side. What this does is create a great opportunity, and we call it bridge bundling. There's a pilot now in 3 counties, Blair, Luzerne, and Westmoreland. And one of the things that we're doing is basically saying, hey, we got a lot of bridges. We know which ones we want to fix. If one's 19 feet 6 inches, one's 20 feet 4 inches, one's 21 feet 8 inches, why are we designing them all like they're the only bridge in the world? Let's grab them in about the same size and say, guess what? We got 20 bridges that are going to be 22 feet. We're going to design them primarily the same. We're going to mass produce the beams. We're going to give a contractor the assignment that says, here's your beams, use them. So we're going to shorten the amount of time it takes to do a construction contract. We're going to benefit from bidding them collaboratively, from designing them consistently. And we're expecting to save about 30 to 40% on the cost of a bridge. So what we're doing in these 3 pilots, again in Blair County, Luzerne County, Westmoreland County, is saying, okay, locals, townships, counties, you usually put 20% of this pot for the bridge. Guess what? Part of the savings, we're not going to charge you a nickel because we think we're going to be able to pay less by having this bundling effort than by what our share was in the original plan. You think that'll go over well if you can knock on people's door and say, hey, guess what? These are the 10 bridges that need work. These are the 20 bridges that need work in Lancaster County. Let's get them. Won't cost you a thing. Your share in this. So that's one of the things we're doing. It won't get them all because you still need resources to get them all, but it will be, again, another really good way of doing things differently. Good example from York County. This is the bridge elimination proposal. York County MPO took a look at saying, when we look at our network of bridges and thinking about what the future is going to look like, do we really need to replace them all? If you look proactively, rather than saying, I got a bridge that's closed, I need to fix it, you can say, you know what, as we move forward, they did their little GIS analysis and said, maybe we got 20 bridges that we don't need replaced somewhere down the road. So they looked at it and ultimately came back and said, we think there are 7. We think there's 7 that we don't have to replace. Average cost for a bridge, $1.5 million, $2 million, $14 million in one county, maybe not the end of the world. In cost savings, times 67, it starts to get to be real money. There are other ways to continue to look at what you're doing and what you're trying to provide, not impacting service, perhaps building a roadway between 2 bridges that are a half mile apart, things like that, of just really thinking about your investments from a holistic perspective rather than just case by case. Again, a little bit of different thinking can really help in how we go about business. And I'm just about wrapping up, but there are so many good things to be talking about. HOP Assist, here's another pilot that we're working on. Essentially, when development goes in, and this is a great place to be talking about it, who doesn't know about last one in really pays? You have a good site, it's where you want development to occur from your planning, from your growth management plans, but everybody's hesitant because I really got stuck because I now have to pay to accommodate all the traffic that's going to be associated with my last project. So we call this HOP Assist, and what we're doing is we're working through to try to come up with real incentives so that we can encourage development to happen where communities want that development to happen, rather than to be looking for a green site that doesn't have much infrastructure cost associated with it. So again, ultimate goal, ensuring economic development's aligned with sound land use principles, really focusing on helping overcome some of those financial challenges for development to occur in the right spot. Oh yes, just a couple more. This is fun. Traffic signal management. One of the easiest things for PennDOT to do is have somebody complain about traffic and traffic signals, and you say, you know what, we don't own those signals. You should call Township, who does really own them. What do you expect me to do, right? No, we need to be involved. PennDOT needs to be involved in helping solve problems with any transportation problem within the Commonwealth. Ownership shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter to the person driving down the road if they're on a township road, a state road, who owns the signal. They just want to get through on a green light. We need to collaboratively continue to work better, effectively together as government. We need to continue to improve our game, and what we're doing is we're looking at some priority corridors right now, but we recognize some parts of the state, a county may have 3 signals. They may not be as advanced in traffic engineering as some who have responsibility for a lot more. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. I had Allegheny County had 1,500 of the 13,890 signals in Pennsylvania. So they had about 10%. You know, they're pretty sophisticated in how they manage them. A little resources wouldn't hurt in helping them do that better, but we need to be able to partner either with contract services by bundling on behalf of multiple municipalities. Again, trying to come up with opportunities for a less expensive way of managing signals, but ultimately really focusing on technological changes that have really come to the land of signals, so that adaptive signals now can platoon vehicles a whole lot more efficiently than they used to, even with the old loop detectors and connected signal systems. So, last one, and I did get a chance to talk about this, I'll say in a pre-lunch discussion. If you don't know about the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank, you're missing out. I happily loan about $30 million a year at 1/2 of prime for any public infrastructure. It's 1.625%. Payback is 10 years. It can be developer led. It can be township owned. If you're trying to figure out how to pave a couple roads that you don't have a budget for, the collateral is the future liquid fuels payments. I love it when I can leverage municipal shale money for transportation infrastructure. But that's one way. If you have an emergency, 0% interest. So if you have a need and you're just trying to figure out how to get through that, that's a really plus. And again, as I wrap up, you know, one thing I want to say is I want to thank you for an opportunity to share. I do think there are a lot of really good things that are going on the transportation front, but there's a lot of scary things. And it's definitely going to be a choice between 2 visions for Pennsylvania. One, where we pay a little bit more and see conditions worsen, or 2, where we pay a little bit more and see some improvements taking place. If you care about this topic, I would encourage you to let your legislator know that you either support or don't. You can forget to call them if you don't. No. But I would encourage you to let them know how important this topic is for Pennsylvania. When you look and see the states around us investing more, and you hear more and more tales of woe of companies moving to one state or another, milk plants, yogurt plants thriving in New York because you can travel with heavier tankers in New York than in Pennsylvania. So you see dairy producers losing opportunity to get rid of their product at a good price. When you see those kinds of things impact your day-to-day life, you recognize how important transportation is. So let them know how you feel, and again, I thank you for an opportunity to come and share.